if we do this National Day of Action, that will get on the radar of the arbitrator, management, and send them the message that this tentative agreement is not enough.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We're going to be diving into the updates on the Postal Service. We'll be speaking to Executive Vice President for Branch 9 momentarily, but basically wanted to run through the information first. And there were more postal news happened in the last week than has happened in a very long time. So the first piece of information is that bargaining concluded. Right? The tentative agreement was voted down, so that triggered 15 days of negotiations between the National Association of Letter Carriers and the United States Postal Service. 15 days, that 15-day time limit is set by the NALC Constitution, so it could not go longer than 15 days. That 15-day period ended on Tuesday, the 18th of February. The day after that, the executive board of the NALC voted not to send an amended tentative agreement to the membership for another vote, presumably because there was not enough movement, and they're moving straight into arbitration. This is what NALC President Brian Renfro had to say about that update.
Post Service did move some on what they were willing to do economically, which included moving around some of the different economic benefits for us, and that included some increased general wage increases. But after discussion of that yesterday, the Executive Council unanimously voted to not enter into a modified tentative agreement. So we do not have an agreement to send out for ratification, and as the information we posted on the website said yesterday, our next step is interest arbitration. So we have selected arbitrator Dennis Nolan to serve as the chair of the three-person arbitration panel. Our case, we've been preparing it for over 2 years now, since the ratification vote was certified by the ballot committee on January 31st. Our attorneys and professionals and everyone that's involved in the preparation of our interest arbitration case have been hard at work to take all the preparation we did previously, fine-tune it, so we are ready to go. As soon as we confirm those dates and when the hearings will begin, we will put that information out. Both the NALC and the Postal Service have an interest in doing this as soon as possible.
Here to react to all of this, we have on the line Chris Pennock, the Executive Vice President of the National Association of Letter Carriers, Branch 9 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Chris, welcome to the program.
Yeah, hi, Jacob. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. We're having this conversation with you today because letter carriers voted down the tentative agreement between the NALC and the USPS. Can you just, as we're going to be reacting to getting your reaction to some of this news, but can you take a step back for us and remind us how that happened and why it happened?
Right. Well, it happened because letter carriers got organized. I don't know that this would have happened just on its own. Just about everybody knew that this tentative agreement was really bad, especially in the face of the historic inflation that we were experiencing. But I don't think that it would have happened without the reform movements, without Bill Defeating NALC, with the concerned letter carriers, with the Mike Cariff campaign, and letter carriers across the country providing leadership on this issue. 55 branches across the country passed resolutions opposing the tentative agreement. We had parking lot rallies. We had photos that went all across social media. We had meetings. We had huge Zoom meetings. There were all kinds of discussions happening opposing what the national NALC was putting forward, and Brian Renfro, that we should accept this sellout agreement. And it was a historic vote. This was only the second time in 55 years that we voted down a tentative agreement. And I mean, the way the vote played out, 71% of letter carriers voted against this thing, and there were more people that voted no than voted in the entire last vote for the previous tentative agreement. So this is a really big deal.
Yeah, when I heard that, I think Tyler Vassar was on the Majority Report last week and mentioned how more people voted no than voted at all during the previous tentative agreement vote. I mean, that's, a really astounding, that's an astounding piece of information. I mean, that is just really, really wild. Definitely an increase in activity among the letter carriers.
41% increase in turnout. It was
How much?
63,000 last time and nearly 90,000 this time.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's huge, and like you said, that happened because postal workers, letter carriers, got organized. And why was the contract not acceptable to letter carriers?
Well, everybody talks about the pay, and the pay was just insulting, right? 1.3% per year, 3.9% over the life of the contract, and then it also didn't give us, the contract ended right before we would have gotten our next pay increase. We get our general wage increases usually in November, and it ended right before that. But the pay was really only part of it. The work rules are just terrible. They took away a significant amount of our fixed office time, which if you're not a letter carrier is, it's like, well, what does that mean? Basically, it means that there would be fewer letter carrier jobs throughout the country. And letter carriers right now are severely overworked in general. Here in Minneapolis, where I am, we have all kinds of mail that's going undelivered. And so we don't have enough people. And so this would reduce the number of letter carriers throughout the country. We gave up, another big give back was giving up the absolute right to not work more than 12 hours in a day or 60 hours in a week. They said, oh, well, you can volunteer those rights away. We don't make enough money in this contract, but you can work unlimited overtime, and that's fine. And many of the other work rules, management throughout the country is abusing 16/7s, emergency placements, where they throw people off the clock. And we're seeing that more and more where they're doing it in non-emergency situations. The idea about the emergency placement is somebody gets into a fist fight, somebody's drunk and driving, or they're committing theft, they're stealing, some kind of egregious safety violation, some real bona fide emergency. Management can say, okay, we got to throw you off the clock, send you home. They're doing it for, somebody gets into a 5-mile-an-hour vehicle accident in the parking garage where, it's not, or another one was the parking garage just closes on a carrier's vehicle, the garage door. Somebody talks back to a manager. Another one is stationary events. In Minneapolis, we have 4 carriers that have been off the clock for, I'm not even sure, 50 days because management thought that they were taking breaks that were too long. And this tentative agreement tried to kind of deal with that and to say, oh, well, you can use your own vacation time, your annual leave, if you're thrown off the clock. And that's just insulting. It's not even a Band-Aid on it, because then it's like, oh, well, you have annual coming up, and then, what do you do when the grievance hasn't gone through? But yeah, so there's so many things on this tentative agreement that are unacceptable to letter carriers, that it was overwhelmingly rejected.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Wow. Yeah, and the idea about, being able to volunteer to work, unlimited overtime. At the very least, if you were going to give the post office that, it seems like you should also say in that exchange, look, if post office, if I'm going to give this to you, then we need to reduce the amount of overtime that we can refuse. Right? If we can volunteer to work as much overtime as we want, we should be able to refuse to work any overtime if we want, right? Like that seems like to me that would be a fair kind of thing. But like you said, that that did not happen in this in this agreement.
Right.
So
yeah, we don't think people should be forced to work any kind of mandatory overtime.
Exactly.
Right. And to say, well, oh, hey, you're only going to be able to be forced 4 hours of overtime every day, and then you can go home. And we already have that right anyway. It says it's an absolute right, and we tell people just go home at 12 hours. The NLRB has upheld that they can't fire you for going home at 12 hours.
Right. So the union and the Postal Service are heading into arbitration now. How did that happen? After you voted down the agreement, and then you had this negotiation period. Now you're heading into arbitration. Why are you going into arbitration, and what happens now in arbitration?
Right. So we don't have the legal right to strike. And so with the way that our contract is set up, that's really the only option when a tentative agreement is voted down. That's what happens. I mean, they get this 15-day negotiating period that just ended to try to see if they can come up with another tentative agreement. And I guess that's at least one positive thing, is that we were able to tell people, well, it's not like it's going to be another 500 days of endless negotiating. It's 15 days and then that's it. Then it goes to arbitration. I don't really like that. I think arbitration is very friendly to management. These arbitrators, it's not like they're retired letter carriers or carpenters or painters. These are retired lawyers in general, or active lawyers. They're people that are friendly to management, to the status quo. And I know that maybe there are some retired letter carriers that are on regional arbitration panels and stuff like that. But, for the most part, I don't think that letter carriers are going to get what they need from arbitration. Now, it's better than just taking this awful tentative agreement that management tried to shove down our throats. But that's something that I think that letter carriers have to understand, is that I think we can do better than arbitration. Our national president, Brian Renfro, will say, when this is brought up about the right to strike, that we should fight for that, he'll say, oh, well, look at the coal miners that were unsuccessfully striking. They'd love to have interest arbitration, rather than the ability to strike. And I don't agree with that at all. The right to strike, I mean, that is our ultimate power as workers, right, is withdrawing our labor. And I think that if you look across the history of the labor movement, and even just the last couple of years, like the longshoremen got massive raises with the short strike. And, strikes are not always successful. But I think our chances would have been much better had we said, okay, you're going to offer us 1.3% per year. Well, we're going to go on strike. Now, we're not at that point right now. And we do have to grapple with the fact that it's illegal. But that's why I think we should go on a campaign to fight for the right to strike.
And so, being that the situation is what it is right now and you're going into arbitration, how can letter carriers and how are some letter carriers proposing that the union and city carriers across the country can affect the outcome of arbitration?
Right. Well, we invite people to get active in the labor movement, in the NALC, in reforming and transforming our union. There's nothing better that you can do with your life than stick up for your fellow coworkers. And I think that this is a great time to be active in politics. When you look across the landscape, political landscape, the labor movement, you can see that the low point of labor resistance is behind us. Working people are fighting back. And so I just encourage people, with kind of all of the bad news that's coming out, to see the activism and invite you to get involved with that. I do want to plug, if I could, the Build a Fighting NALC website. It's fightingnalc.com. We're trying to help bring more people into the fight. We have public Zoom meetings. We're organizing local chapters of BFN to try to build power throughout the country. But back to the question of what can we do to affect the outcome of arbitration. We're pushing for March 23rd to be a national day of action, to have public rallies in support of our tentative agreement. And also now with everything coming out about the Trump administration trying to take over the post office, that can also be some of the messaging, is to defend the post office, defend other federal workers. And the reason for March 23rd is that originally the Mike Cariff campaign, one of the people running for NALC national president in 2026, he had plans to do a march in Washington, D.C. from NALC headquarters to USPS headquarters. Now, we just got word that National is going to do that march, which I think is a good thing. This is what we wanted from National, to do actions and get in the fight. And so that's great, but not so great news is that they said, oh, well, we decided that we don't want to do it on a Sunday when nobody will be at USPS headquarters to hear us or see us. So we're going to do it on 2 days later, on a Tuesday. And presumably they're going to do it in the middle of the day when letter carriers can't be there, and they're not harnessing the power of collective action, which is kind of typical Brian Renfro, to do these kinds of actions in the middle of a day on a work day, rather than inviting. Carriers from all over the East Coast could have come to that. If you'd done it on a Sunday, it could have been a huge thing. And it's not that the staffers in USPS headquarters are the audience. The audience is the country, right? The media that's there. We don't need these USPS staffers to come down and hear our chants and speeches, right? We need the media to see that. And so, but we're still going to do the National Day of Action on March 23rd. And so I'd invite carriers all across the country to try to organize actions where you are. We're going to do one in Minneapolis. Tyler's looking at getting permits at the state capitol in St. Paul. And we're going to invite every large branch, any letter carrier in Minneapolis to come and join us, and our brothers and sisters in the other postal unions, the APWU, and anybody in the labor movement that wants to come support us.
So originally,
I think that's the path forward.
Yeah. So originally the plan was a march in D.C. on March 23rd, and now the NALC has moved that date. And it basically took the idea of a march, but said we're going to move that date. And so the reaction from folks outside of National has been to retain March 23rd as the date, but to say this is going to be a national day of action. We're going to have local rallies and events and stuff like that. Still on March 23rd, when working letter carriers and postal workers can come and attend and show out. And then National is going to do their thing with, presumably a little decreased turnout, but hopefully as much as possible.
National is not calling for that. That's something that Building a Fighting NALC is pushing for. They just took over the march and moved it to the 25th. And so we're just saying we need to piggyback off of that. We need to have a national day of action. Unfortunately, our national leadership doesn't. They don't understand the power of collective action. And so we just said, we want to do our action on that date. And, several other branches throughout the country are running with March 23rd. And we want to encourage other folks from throughout the country to hop on for that date.
And so, the immediate reaction to that from some maybe skeptics of this kind of idea about the mobilization stuff is going to be, why would an arbitrator care about letter carriers or supporters doing things like this? Can you walk us through your thoughts on that, on why will these actions affect how an arbitrator ultimately decides?
Right. Yeah, that's a question that comes up. Well, why do rallies? And I've had some conversations with MBAs, national business agents, where they'll say, well, what is that going to do? We're the ones that negotiate the contract behind closed doors. And I just totally disagree with that. If we do this National Day of Action, that will get on the radar of the arbitrator, of management, and send them the message that this tentative agreement is not enough. We want to hear from the letter carriers in Brooklyn, Staten Island that have installed a shower in their union hall because they have homeless letter carriers. We want to hear from San Francisco, where people are homeless out there as well, or they have to live 2 hours away to find affordable housing. We want to hear from the Minnesota and Michigan letter carriers that have to work through, -20, -30 wind chill, walking through the snow, from the carriers in Las Vegas and Florida that are working in vehicles in these LLVs that sometimes get up to 130 degrees. And telling our story like that and working together in collective action is very powerful. And it's reminiscent of the strike. And these bosses are afraid of us, right? They are afraid of us withdrawing our labor. And so us getting organized and getting militant, and not that I'm saying that we should go on strike, but it's something that they are afraid of and that they will take note of.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.